we're back. Welcome to Abstractable. This is a podcast for the entrepreneurial spirited, the curious, the hungry, and the creative people amongst us. In it, we distill the ideas from the world's best thinkers in business, startups, psychology, and the arts, and lots of other places too. Well, in today's episode, it's a follow-on from last week's episode, which was about foodies. And this time we talk about two musicians. The documentaries about Miles Davis, The Birth of Cool, and the documentary about John Coltrane, Chasing Train.
On today's episode, we dive into the world of jazz and the incredible lives that these musical pioneers had. We connect up the parallels between last week's chefs and this week's musicians. We talk about how to scale art and brand and if it's even possible. And we also talk about the impact that drugs actually had on both of these musicians' lives, for better or for worse. So why? We should all be looking for the essence that sits inside us. And there are many recurring themes that occur between all of these different pioneers, no matter which industry they were in. You can obviously check out these documentaries on Netflix or elsewhere. And of course, find full video from our episodes on YouTube or check out our website, abstractable.co. We hope you enjoy the episode. And if you did, feel free to share it with others. We'd really appreciate it.
I think the first health book we should do is Why You Sleep. I've been meaning to read that. So
I've heard great things about that book. Not just from you, so I'm keen to jump into it. And there's also the other one that I'm reading, which I think you've read, which is Breath.
Are you enjoying that?
I am very much enjoying that.
Not sure if it's pod worthy, but and we've already talked about it on one intro, so we probably should skip over it.
Okay. So you didn't qualify for you, mate.
It's intro worthy. I'm not sure if it meets full pod.
It doesn't meet the threshold to get into a full episode. All right.
That's right.
So I'm about 30% of the way through, and I'll let you know. All
right. That's good. Thanks.
We could jostle it out.
Well, we need, yeah. Well, I guess we could have an argument about it. But it was enjoyable, so yeah. But Why We Sleep, that's our first one, I think. So let's do it.
Yeah. I've heard great things. And the really brief version, Lockie, is sleep is really, really important.
So we don't need to read the book. Is that it? There's got to be more to it than that. Everyone who reads it thinks it's fantastic. So I think it's on our list for sure. All right, let's. Today's episode's a follow-on episode, which is pretty cool.
Have we done one of these before?
Well, we kind of we dreamt up this episode from the Moleman Tower episode that will precede this in the release schedule.
Yeah, the episode had reached its limit, and there was also a very important AFL game to get to. It
was a pressing engagement that I needed to get to, and I did get there and watch Richmond win, so it was worth cutting you off, Ryan, for that. But
that might have been the difference, mate. That might be the reason you guys are in the grand final.
I think it is. And, I did warn you at the start. If Richmond starts play, we have to end this episode, and I was true to my word.
I'm out. It's good.
So today we're talking about Miles Davis and John Coltrane. Bit of a double header.
Yeah, and so this feeds off last episode, and last episode was centered around this idea of authenticity and seeking, the true path in life, and what that involved for particularly Francis Melman and Jeremiah Tower, who are both famous chefs doing their own thing, doing their own authentic crafts. Both men are still alive. Can't say the same for our two spotlights today, mate.
Yeah, no, they're not alive, but they live on in their music, that's for sure. So, if there's something behind chefs that we're kind of interested in, it's jazz musicians, I think. Entrepreneurs first, chefs. musicians, and then probably, coming in after that is just painters, I think.
Okay, that's your hierarchy of important occupations in this world.
Not importance, but just it's something that they're interesting. So
intrigue. Okay.
Yeah, intrigue level. So
okay. So Miles Davis, right? I think I need to add a note here. Both of these biographies are so much shorter than they need to be, and I'm sure if there's any fans watching, they will be cringing when they hear some of this. But we need to fly through some of this so that we can start to move into a bit more discussion around them.
Get to the meat.
So Miles Davis, beginning with Miles, he was born in 1926, Elton, Illinois. So this is, post World War One, preceding World War Two, and raised in East St. Louis. By the age of 12, music had become the most important thing in his life, he says. And 1935, so at the age of 11, he received his first, the age of 9, he received his first trumpet. And this was the biggest influence on his life. Some pretty astronomical things happening at such a young age, and very memorable, clearly.
So his family was very rich, which was kind of rare for a black family in the South at that time. So his father, I think, was the second richest person in the state or something like that. And so he had kind of a privileged upbringing, but much like Tower, his home life was not a very happy one. His mother would get beaten by his dad, and they had a tumultuous relationship. It was a rocky household from what we're led to believe.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities there to Jeremiah Tower. So we're skipping forward here, 1944. So this is where he listens to his father's advice, I believe, who suggested that he go to the Institute of Musical Arts, which is now known as the Juilliard School in New York City. And so 1944 accepted that and decided to pursue that. But he skipped a lot of classes because he was on the lookout for his idol, Charlie Parker, also known as Bird in the world of jazz. And so he would be going to the various jazz nightclubs just looking to find the Bird. So he eventually did find the Bird and started making conversation and hanging around with those guys that were in his band more. So in 1945, shortly after, he actually replaced Dizzy Gillespie in Bird's quintet, which is, I guess, that's a pretty remarkable thing given the status of Dizzy, and it also goes to show because he shortly after moved to Paris because he wanted to get around Europe a little bit, and he loved Paris. There was a bigger affection for Paris. In 1949, even after being in Paris for a period of time, he was struggling for work, and this is a guy that had been doing work with the likes of Bird, the likes of Dizzy Gillespie, these famous jazz musicians in a city that was all about jazz. So 1950s onwards, he continues to evolve. And, we've skipped over some remarkable albums that have been released here along the way. But, this is where we start to see things like The Birth of Cool and kind of Blue. But he was having some tough years, particularly related to heroin. And so much so that he nearly lost it all. Then,
It's probably worth saying here that he was quite he had a darker side to him, and he had a young family when he left to pursue his jazz career in the 40s that he just kind of left behind, and got on with his life. He'd see them, but he wasn't much of a father. He, ended up being with successive partners, but was physically abusive to some of them, and was generally just a bit of a prick to be around a lot of the time. He was kind of a dark, moody person.
He didn't talk a lot, apparently. He kept to himself unless he was kind of pissed off at you, in which case you'd definitely know about it. Which is very strange to think of this, what he became and this lead band member to be kind of somewhat secluded to himself and not talk a great deal. And that was one of the things that Coltrane really remembers about being with Davis. So anyway, nearly loses everything throughout the later end of the 50s,
Just wanted to kind of touch on this one point that's in the documentary that both of us watched for this, which we should probably reference, The Birth of Cool by Miles Davis, is that they describe this kind of, in 1955, a promoter threw a jazz festival in Newport, and Miles was sort of coming back from his battle with drugs and was not too well known. It was kind of known but not too famous, and he kind of begged to get his way into this festival, and he got a set there, and he was playing this kind of interesting kind of music there. People were like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then one song, he just pulled the microphone, which one of those old school, silver metal microphones, and got his trumpet and put it right down, right over the mic, and pulled the that thing I think it's called the mute, which kind of distorts the sound of the trumpet. And he played this long, soulful ballad with this mute on the end of the microphone. And it was something that no one had ever done. And it was incredibly brave to do, but the audience was just astounded by this sound. And this hush came over the room, and people were just sitting there with their eyes closed. Some people were even crying. It was so moving, this piece of music. And they say in the documentary that, it's brave to play a ballad like that. And this was kind of his moment where he showed how creative he really was.
Yeah, and this is that really modal jazz type feel. So that very slow, because it was so different to what had been done, what the paradigm was prior to this, which was all about the bebop and very, very double time focused, fast improvisation, jazz that's all over the place. This became the absolute opposite of that, this very slow, exposed jazz. And so I think that's, he's very vulnerable playing something like that, because it's just him with his, muted trumpet. So incredible. And then he doesn't just stop there with modal jazz. He, much like what he does throughout his entire career, he continues to innovate. And, so 1968 through to 1975 is known as the electric period. And this is where he started experimenting with, the likes of different electrical instruments within the band and swapping things out. There was like Eastern influences, all kinds of things. And one of the famous albums from this period is Bitches Brew, which also happens to be the same name of the song that I think is probably my favourite Davis track. So I remember seeing a concert, right, that was held in, I think it was somewhere in Germany. Right. Now, I obviously wasn't there, but this is a recording. And he played, must have been early 70s. And so it was very fresh after his kind of initiation of the electric period and really experimenting in the public domain with the electrical instruments. And it's like a big fancy concert theatre. You think of like a big theatre that you go to. Everyone's dressed up in their suits or tuxedos or whatever it is. And I expect that many people were going into that concert hoping to hear, some of his earlier albums, particularly like, So What or something, song So What, and that very modal jazz. Instead, they just play this, concoction of electrical music. There's like bongos, and they just play non-stop for, it must be like an hour and a half. There's no speaking except for like the MC at the start and the end, and they finish up, walk off stage, and that's done. And I don't know. I imagine there's some people in the crowd that were just like, what the fuck?
What did I just see? Yeah.
Yeah. But this is the thing. And it's just this innovation and not being held back. And there's very strong parallels to the likes of Dylan there, Bob Dylan, and, doing his electric thing at the Newport Jazz Festival as well. So again, 1960, actually, no, sorry. Kind of Blue. I don't actually have the release date for this, but Kind of Blue has been regarded.
1960, yeah, from memory.
Yeah. He is arguably the greatest jazz album of all time. And most people would know that song, So What, if they heard it, even if they're not jazz fans. So, and it really did inflected the entire world of jazz. And he lived until the age of 65.
Yeah. Interestingly, one of the members of his quartet was our other, I suppose, focus of this episode. So a nice little segue for you there.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for setting me up. So 1926, John Coltrane was born. Same year as Miles Davis. There must have been something in the water in, 1925, I guess. And so he was born in Hamlet, North Carolina. 1938, again, this is a very skipping forward biography. His father, his aunt, and his grandparents all died within a couple of months, which is incredible. It'd be absolutely heartbroken at such a young age. And so he was raised by his mother and a close cousin. Through primary school, he played the clarinet and alto horn. That's not the alto sax; it's the alto horn.
Is that right?
I don't even really know what that is, and it's just it's one of those like more rounded
like
horns
a French
as opposed
horn.
to the longer. Yes, I believe so. And so he's playing in the community band. This was his early introduction to playing with others. And it wasn't until high school that he started playing the saxophone. However, he was playing the saxophone all the way through high school until 1943 when his mum bought him his first alto sax.
Ooh.
And so the alto sax is like what most people associate as being the common saxophone, today. Moving on, 1945, so that would make him 19 years of age. Remember, this is 1945, World War II finished. He actually joined the Navy at some point in time. This is prior to the atomic bombs going off and the kind of roundup of World War II. He enlisted in the Navy, so he wouldn't be enlisted in or conscripted to the Army to avoid that. And he joined the Navy band as soon as he could, and apparently he wasn't a great musician at this point in time, which is very fascinating.
Interesting to kind of just note that,
Yeah, there was some high profile musicians in the documentary, and they were just like, he was not good. And, or, you never would have guessed that this was John Coltrane playing when you hear some of those early recordings.
So the doco for this is Chasing Train, which is also on Netflix if you want to check it out.
Yeah. A very good documentary, by the way. And so that's why it's appearing on the show. Hey? That's why I got the cut. 1945, he saw Charlie Parker. So the same guy that was Davis's, overarching idol. He saw Charlie Parker in concert, and it absolutely blew his mind. This double time jazz that that was most prominent or most leading edge at the time, and who Bird was one of the pioneers for. So at that point in time, he's noted as saying, "I knew it was for me." Then 1946, he left Pearl Harbor, which is where he was stationed, and he got on the road. So left the Navy and just got on the road because he wanted to pursue this jazz, this idea of jazz more, and just started playing with as many jazz musicians, different types of bands and things. He wasn't discriminatory in terms of what types of jazz or even what types of music that he was playing with. 1949, he eventually got a gig with Dizzy Gillespie, and he was known to practice more than anyone. So he came in as quite a junior member of the band, but he was known to just practice. So much so that they would play these concerts, and they'd have band practice and they'd play their concerts, and then they'd go back to their hotels and he would still be practicing. So much so that he would receive noise complaints, and instead of practicing with sound, he would just practice his fingering on the saxophone after that. So he was prolific.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Apparently he was practicing 25 hours a day. So from 1955, he started playing with the likes of Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk, and he had many bouts with these guys in terms of bands and things. We're skipping a lot here. This is the real kind of innovation inflection point for Coltrane and really coming into his own. But there's one particular album, A Love Supreme, which is regarded as also one of the greatest jazz albums of all time. And there's some famous musicians that say it's like Moses coming down with the tablets, from the mountain.
So what is it about his music? It's very emotional when you listen to it. I think it's got a real feeling that's associated to it. And again, it sounded very different at the time when he started playing like this with his saxophone, but it's now kind of standard jazz that you'd think of. But that's just because in time everyone copied him. And if you listen to something like Naima, you know it means something. It's just there's years of practice behind this originality, and his earlier recordings that they play in the documentary to when he starts releasing his own work, it's a completely different sound.
Absolutely, mate. And his life was cut short at the age of 40. He died of liver cancer, which is obviously as a result of he was a very big alcoholic for a number of years. He was very, very big into heroin for many years as well, which we didn't mention that he actually quit cold turkey, which is apparently coming face to face with Hell's Gate. Not an enjoyable experience.
Smoker too, so he didn't look after himself particularly well. But by all accounts, quite a lovely man.
Yes, I was going to say, there's a kind of polarisation here between Davis, who was quite, I won't say necessarily violent, but quite aggressive and quite not nice to be around, particularly when he was drinking and on drugs, whereas Coltrane was quite the opposite. People would say that you wouldn't even know that he was doing these things, which is very fascinating. So, and when he died, it's just a quote here from Dr. Cornel West, who's a philosopher. He says he left a bit of heaven behind, though, with him. And so I think that there's a particular reference there. You mentioned Naima. I think that's one of the songs that certainly speaks to that. But there's also A Love Supreme, the entire album. And, it's just that entire legacy that he kind of left behind. And I'd be very fascinated to see where the trajectory was going to lead after after that, if he'd been alive the same as Miles until 1991, what might have happened.
Yeah. There's something, we talked about this in previous episodes, that there's something about dying at your peak that immortalizes you in the memories of people. And, rightly, good or bad, that's certainly what happened to him. Taken very, very young. So.
Yeah. And so what are we trying to do today, mate? Because last episode we spoke about, as I said, the authenticity type things and our fascination with chefs and famous chefs. Where are we trying to go today?
Well, I guess we wanted to explore this and try and pull some of we kind of got to the point, I think, last episode where we felt that we were talking about the creative endeavor of being a chef. And why is it so appealing to kind of learn about? And it was kind of the repetition, and it's very relatable in terms of you eat food, you've prepared food, you can kind of touch it. It's the combination of things. It's the whole entrepreneurial part of it and the team management part. And there's a lot of things that are kind of very interesting. And it kind of got us talking about, well, where else does that kind of occur? And we started talking into music and we've talked in the past about jazz in particular being an incredibly creative endeavor. And these two guys are just really fascinating people, and it feels like there's something interesting to explore there, and then pull back to what we kind of learnt about Molman and Jeremiah Tower as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a number of themes that come across out of all of these, various documentaries and stories about these people's lives. And one thing that really struck for me, mate, is they've all created their own essence, and this essence has been created off the back of toiling, where eventually you're playing so far in the depths of your knowledge and expertise that you start to, I actually wonder, they probably start to get bored playing around in the same space. So they start to experiment and start to push things and change things and try and see what they can play with to start to release some of that internal essence, if you will. And so this is where you start to see them, releasing from the shackles of convention, like Davis did, like Dylan did, like any of these guys did, and trending towards that authentic vision that they're striving for. It's almost like that vision actually gets louder and louder the more that they go on, so they need to keep chasing it more and more.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the word essence is a really interesting word that you've used. It kind of captures that idea. I think the thing that interests me about these kind of people is the way that they use, they're incredibly creative, and that sort of plays with into their identity and off their identity. And they have that self-creation kind of aspect to them that I find really interesting to explore as well. It's quite unique. They definitely don't fall into that mimetic pattern of copying others, at least not for too long. They all start that way, because if you want to be, I think something we've learned doing this podcast is creative people learn from the past first to find the edge. And, there's another two examples here. Miles at Juilliard going through a very traditional type of education in music, and Coltrane doing a longer apprenticeship under the likes of Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker and Miles Davis himself and Thelonious Monk. So he took that long path, and only after about 10 to 15 years of playing and tutoring did he start to hit his height of creativity. So,
yeah.
And it came
and that
in
was
a
the
burst.
height we saw, mate. That was the height we saw. I'm sure there was greater mountains to climb beyond that for him. if he'd been allowed to. So
what is the essence of Miles?
Well, I think where it starts, mate, as you said, is it starts from that very formal background, which then moved into, and there's obviously a lot of trauma in his past, and I think you actually see a lot of that come out through his music. Particularly, so you look at the Kind of Blue album, and it's quite, not going to say depressing, but it can be quite sad, quite moving in that sense. But even if you go to the likes of Bitches Brew, which is much faster and much more erratic, it's erratic, it's almost aggressive in some ways, and you can feel that kind of trauma coming out of his music, and I really think that there's something about that shines through his music. Even the songs that don't sound particularly, traumatic or particularly sad or anything. So I think that's one thing.
Yeah. He says in the, one of his quotes is, if anyone wants to be about creating, they have to be about change. And that's certainly a constant in his life, is change, be it from the people he's with. They seem to be changing every 5 to 10 years. The type of music he's playing, the type of creative, I suppose, music that he's actually playing, the clothes he's wearing, all those sort of things are in constant motion, and he is about, as Dylan would say, creating himself through his.
And he's not going to be rooted to convention. So, there was that famous inflection point for Miles where he went from wearing, the jazz attire, which was very much about the suit and tie and playing the jazz in a very formal way, to then breaking out, and a decade later you're seeing him in like elastic yellow pants and really loud, giant glasses and big platform heels, and it's incredible, mate. And part of that was actually influenced by his partner at the time, which he had a number of partners, but she got quite a few dedications throughout a number of his albums and a number of his songs. I think she appears on a few of his albums, actually. I can't recall her name. But I think that she was almost like a muse to him in some ways, or a reinvigoration of a muse for him.
I was going to mention this. I loved the way he dressed. Particularly in those early years. He was beautifully dressed,
When you say the early years, what early years are you talking about? The suits or the louder stuff?
Sort of like, it's around the suits, but a lot of the time he wasn't wearing suits. He was wearing like kind of a lot of cotton sort of shirts, and he just looked awesome. He looked so cool, but
and then he got even cooler.
And then he went wild. So.
But this is the thing, right? Is the suit is so inconspicuous, like this jazz suit, Little do we know that they're, doing tons of cocaine and heroin, and they're all alcoholics and stuff behind the scenes. You wouldn't pick that.
He dressed beautifully, but I don't think he was a beautiful person.
No.
In the sense of a kind person. That's certainly the impression I got. So I guess, this constant change, it leads you to this edge of creativity, and then because you're always changing, you're kind of losing people along the way. And that's a kind of bargain you make, is that, you saw with him, a lot of people didn't understand that next step, and others did. And so he lost his original fan base, but he gained a new one. as he was playing with younger people with newer things. And so, but that didn't really bother him, you know. He was willing to kind of change up the people that he was playing with, as well as leave behind the people who loved his music too.
Music has a particular advantage here, mate, is as you leave behind, and Miles didn't have any of his old records in his house. You've got here, mate. And so he was kind of shedding his past self, shedding off as he pursued forward in this craft. The advantage is, as what comes off with that, that shedding of his skin, were these albums. And people can continue to listen to his stuff from 1959, the same as we can listen to his stuff from 1975. It's that's the advantage that we've got in this sphere.
But the lived experience that Miles had was, but almost betraying those people by moving on, and disappointing them, disappointing millions, you would say.
Yeah.
They wanted him to roll around and play the classics, or do more of this and just stay with them, but he wouldn't do that.
I need to pick on another company for once, but I'm gonna point to Apple again. But this time so obviously Steve Jobs was booted out early 90s, and then he, they continued to corporatize. So they wanted to continue to make profit off the things that were working, and, duplicating things and doing minor iterations on those products. And it was just an absolute flop until Jobs came back, and, he was renowned to just basically cut everything when he came back in and just focus on one particular thing or a couple of particular things. And I think there was a similar thing that he did with his developers. They had to move to a completely different way of developing their software. And so you have this community of developers that's helping you build your product and build products for your product, like the App Store here. But they had to completely re-innovate that. And with that, they got a lot of developers offside. But it was the path that they had to pursue in order to lead to some of the great creations that they've had since, such as the thriving App Store, etc. So I think we see a lot of parallels in different spaces. Thankfully, in the space of music, you've got music that you can really hang on to. Some people hang on to like an older phone or an older iPod, but there's a potentially less functionality there.
Yeah. And
you certainly can't do that with a restaurant.
No. So yeah, that's insightful. I think, going back to what you said about the records in his house, that's a really interesting, insight into his mindset, is that, your words of shedding the past is very true. It's like that Bob Dylan thing where they asked him about the Rolling Review, what do you think about the Rolling Thunder Review, this revolutionary thing? He's like, well, I don't care. He's like, that was gone,
That was something we did.
Yeah.
I think is his quote.
Yeah, he didn't give a shit. He's thinking about his next album, and I'm sure he does care, but, he certainly cares a lot less than I would. And the fact that he didn't keep any of his old records in his house, Miles, is really talks to that mindset of always looking ahead, which, I'm not sure is all good, but, it's certainly an insight into that incessantly creative process. And if to be
you brought this up, you brought this up in the first part. Right? It was about whether you thought Melman was trying to escape or run away from something, and so it could be looked in that light. But I think that's the nature of creativity and people that are pursuing creative endeavors. And this is why you see creativity, like extreme creativity, being on the brink of madness to some degree, because you pursued so far in this other realm that there's like a grasp of reality that starts to unhinge a little bit for some of these creatives.
So something else with Miles is that there was a period after 1975 where he got into such a bad state that he didn't play the trumpet for 5 years, from 1975 to 1980. He didn't pick it up once, and then in the end it was almost basically a 6-year period where he didn't play at all. And the interesting thing about that is that he only lived till he was about 65, which we would say he died young nowadays. And so the amount that he was able to achieve in those years was astronomical in terms of popular influence on musical innovation. And he still took 6 years off. It kind of tells you how long a career is, So Coltrane, he did a 10 to 15-year apprenticeship and died at 40, but created some of the greatest music ever. So, this kind of tip of the iceberg moment can happen in quite a quick succession, but it's also a very long career that you've got a lot of time to kind of do lots of different things, take breaks. My thought of taking 6 years off would be, oh my God, that's it, it's done,
But you see this, we see the same thing. A really nice parallel here, mate, is Jordan and taking time off to play baseball. He was like burnt out of basketball.
That's a sports career. It's even shorter.
Yeah, correct. And he took those years off to play baseball, but it actually rekindled this fire, and it almost like made him realize how much he loved basketball. And I suspect there's a similarity there for Miles. And it also gives us this opportunity for a different perspective, because he's almost like seeing the world through the trumpet. And then it gave him a chance to see the world without the trumpet. Although I think heroin probably played a big role throughout that period of time as well, mate.
Definitely. So he wasn't seeing much besides the inside of his apartment, I don't think. But so let me ask you, I mean, you've kind of taken a break from probably the traditional career path this year. How's it affected your life?
Interesting. So the biggest thing for me, mate, out of all of this is the race that you feel in is a self-perpetuated race to some degree. And I think and what I mean here is like that corporate race. And so the really pursuing Monday to Friday, Saturday and or Sunday, depending on how much you work, there's other things outside of that. And so I think that was a big illumination for me, and that there is a slower time that can be found, which I think is, it's not something you want to spend a lot of time there, but it's allowed. The big thing for me was jumping out of the safety net, if you will. There's like a safety net associated with a secure job. And I think jumping outside of that safety net, you realize that you haven't actually hit the ground, or the safety net wasn't even necessarily there, and you haven't hit the ground and perished. I think there's opportunity, and you start to see some of that opportunity and start to grasp some of that opportunity. I wouldn't suggest that people just get up and quit their jobs and go and do that. But I think what's to be gleaned is that there's a lot of other things happening around you. And so just as Davis pulling back from the trumpet or Jordan pulling back from the basketball, you kind of realize how much is out there.
So has it changed your perspective of time?
Yes, to some degree. I'm trying to kind of frame myself in that perspective at the moment. So I think there's an idea of slower time, but at the same time, I'm very much in the work pace now. So yeah, it's a little bit hard to grasp. But I think if you go on extended travel, I think extended travel is a great way to look at this idea of slow time. And I'm not talking like traveling for 3 weeks here or something like that. I'm talking many months of traveling, and you everything settles. As soon as I started working, as soon as I left the working life and we started by traveling, mate, for the first 3 months, it took me 2 months to unwind, or 2 months to kind of slow down. And then it wasn't until that, third or even fourth month that I was like, and you start to see what's happening, see things going on. And
it's interesting.
There's something really powerful in that. And I think this is one thing I recommend is for certainly high school students or post-university students, that they should take a gap year and travel and go and do things. Obviously a little bit hard at the moment, but there's also no reason why you can't travel in your own country or go and explore other things.
Unless you live in Victoria.
Unless you live in Victoria. Maybe soon to be not, but
I think that we'll be out of jail soon. So, wow, it's a great insight. I think something that struck me, if I can comment on your situation, is that by slowing down,
I'm not going to stop you, mate.
Oh, you can edit it out later. Is that by slowing down, you've made some decisions that have been really impactful decisions that if you hadn't stopped, you wouldn't have made those. So it's been a very ineffective period, because much like Miles and Coltrane, they created 1 or 2 albums that changed the world. For your life, there may be 1 or 2 decisions that you come to that changed the trajectory in a positive way, that you'll go back and go, oh, wow. If I appreciate
you condensing my 5-minute ramblings into one sentence, Lockie. You're good at that.
No worries.
So it's 100%. That perspective of slow time allows you to make more impactful decisions, I think. It gives you time to think about the fact that there is even a decision that you could make, I think.
Opens up the possibility. Cool.
So the train.
Well, just before we get on to the Mr. Train, this is my favourite quote from Miles Davis. Okay. Sometimes you have to play a long time to be able to play like yourself. Just want
if
to
that's
give
not all
little space there, because just to let that land, because that sums up almost everything about these 4 people that we're talking about, I think.
Yeah. Because it doesn't just talk about the practice, but it talks about the practice in pursuit of a vision. And this is the absolute testament to every single one of those, those 4, as we've certainly highlighted how much they practiced and how much they kind of were in the grind to some degree.
To me, it's like you almost can't know until you've done that what your sound is. You can't see it until you've gone through this journey, but you have to go through that journey to create it and form it. And one day you'll know it, and then you'll realize you're no longer copying everyone else, as long as you're pushing to find that for you. To me, that's just so inspiring.
It's the ultimate tinkering for me, mate. I just see it as like you're just kind of playing around. I keep referring to the depths. You're playing around in the depths of this knowledge that you have because of this toiling that you've been doing. And because you're tinkering around there, you're pulling levers, you're playing with how things need to be configured. It's a very engineering way of describing it, but
it's too mechanical. Like there's something quite spiritual about this. This is where your word essence feels very apt. I think.
Yeah, it's like herding smoke down there. You're certainly not pulling levers, but you're starting to play, and and maybe like you've got the ability to fan the smoke.
fan the smoke to find your essence. I like it. So, Mr. Coltrane. I find his music a more, Kind of Blue is something else, but I have to say Coltrane's music is a bit more touching, I think.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any particular, like, what's your Coltrane track?
I love Naima. Alabama's pretty touching. I think that much of it, I actually don't know the names of the songs. You really need to.
It's because there's so many bloody songs, mate. These guys have got album after album after album. It's just continuous.
Often when I'm
because they get in there, they record like a 2-hour session, single take 2-hour session with the microphones all just set up, listening to what they're doing, and that's 20 tracks, bang.
It feels to me when I'm listening to jazz, there's like 20 songs in a song. It's such a long.
It's a journey.
And they kind of string together and meld together, and just it does make you feel something.
Yeah. Case in point, mate. I mentioned Bitches Brew, which is in the same kind of sphere probably as Ole, which is without a doubt my favourite Coltrane track. It is an absolute journey going through that song.
I mean, my favourite things is interesting because you gotta know it.
I can't stand it. I cannot stand it. It would not have hit me like it hit the rest of the world at that time.
I wouldn't say I can't stand it. It's definitely not my favourite.
It's a lot better than the original.
It's quite fun. It's got like an Arabic feel to it too. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, I've clearly got a.
It's his pop song.
Yeah,
right.
It was his pop song. Yeah. But he mind you, he did do it. He did do a seemingly good job of it. I'm just not a fan of that song. I think it just really ticked me off when I was younger watching that in Sound of Music. I don't know why.
Yeah, fair enough. So, what did you think? What struck you about John Coltrane?
Really, mate, a lot of the things that we've spoken about, and one of the big things is able to achieve so much in such a short time. The striking thing for me was that he was so different from Davis personality-wise. He was kind of like this lovable person, even though he had these terrible substance abuse issues going on, or alcoholism, etc.
It's funny because Davis didn't speak much, but the depiction of Coltrane made me feel like he was more of a shy person creatively.
Definitely.
Whereas Miles was a very confident person,
Yeah. I don't know enough about either of them, but Miles looks very confident on stage, but it's very strange to see someone like Miles and to then hear that he was very quiet or kept to himself, didn't talk much, because it's the opposite of what comes out on stage. And to some degree, it's also the opposite of what happens with, Coltrane. Like Coltrane is on fire when he's on that stage, when he's in his element, in his zone. And, I wonder if that's part of it. It's like, I don't talk in this kind of sphere. I talk when I've got the saxophone in my mouth or I've got the trumpet in my mouth to some degree.
Miles kind of talked. His quotes are very much like he's swearing. He's got that raspy voice from his operation on his vocal cords or whatever. But Coltrane's like much more of like a spiritual person, I think. Certainly when I read what he wrote,
Well, I think he had a pretty close encounter with death, and that's known to move people a lot. And I think he had that spiritual awakening that occurred as a result of, passing through the threshold of Hell's Gate, as you'd say, which was that when he went cold turkey off heroin, because he was a full heroin addict, very regular user, and just decided to quit cold turkey, lock himself in his bedroom and quit cold turkey. And he said that just awoke something inside, which you often see with people that have close encounters with death.
Well, a lot of like the coming of age rituals in sort of tribal societies are around facing death to move into adulthood. I wonder if that's something we may have lost along the way.
Well, you look at some of the Amazonian tribes, mate. Some of their favourite rites of passage was to give their youth a big dose of ayahuasca and just let them go. So maybe there's some things that, and I imagine that's a super traumatic experience, but we've certainly lost some of those rites of passage.
Yeah, some of them are still pretty brutal and still exist, whether it's like some of those African tribes with the cutting of the foreheads, or you go and starve in the bush for 3 to 4 days in some other cultures, and things like that to make you really feel something. I'm not entirely sure what it's about, but it seems to be pretty constant across almost all cultures that there was something like that.
Well, I think it's a shake-up. That's what it is. In all regards, these things are like, hang on, this has been the status quo up until this point, and then to have something so incredibly shaken by what that situation is, you can't help but come out the other side and go, oh shit, there was that. I'm not living in the status quo. I'm not living in what I thought was everything that could exist. There's so much more that can exist, and I've just experienced that. And I think that's some of these rites of passage really push onto people. It's like the famous Navy SEALs rite of passage where they go through Hell Week, and I'm sure people come out the other side of that completely, quite changed, even if they aren't broken throughout the process.
Yeah, and then there's some people, like we've talked about in other episodes, that go and find their own version of this, like the Into the Wild guy or others. So I was going to say, mate, we've spoken about the this idea that you can capture music, and music, even though it's not as good as being in concert. Obviously, being in concert is again just another level on top. You can actually capture music. And I think that's what's so great about capturing it. And so in effect, you're capturing some of the essence. And when you listen to something, it's a very personal experience. It's a bit like listening to the radio or a podcast. You kind of feel like you're being talked to. And music has that same effect. Studio music. There's nothing better than putting on like a set of noise cancelling headphones and, listening to some good tunes no matter what they are. Your favourite tracks. There's something about that speaks. And, you can't quite do that with a restaurant. No, you can't.
Yeah, which is something that we saw out of the last episode, mate, and something I wanted to touch on was this idea of like scaling that and really kind of bolstering the brand, but being able to replicate the brand elsewhere. And so music is able to do that through recordings, and restaurants try to do things in many different ways. But the problem is when restaurants try to replicate what they're doing, unless you're McDonald's, you will lose the essence.
Yeah. You can't scale art like that in the real. You can do it in other ways, but it doesn't seem to work very well. It loses the uniqueness of it when you try and put a Star's restaurant everywhere.
that's exactly what caused the kind of crumbling, was trying to expand that vision out, and caused Jeremiah Tower's stars to collapse. It's because the art is actually imbued within the creator as opposed to the establishment that's creating the food, unless you do it really well. But I can't see there's many examples of that.
It's still not authentic though, I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean, the only person that might have been able to do that is someone like Danny Meyer, who created Union Square Cafe and a couple of other restaurants, but then created Shake Shack, which is now a billion-dollar company. He seems to be able to, but his whole thing is he's not a chef. He sort of sees himself as someone who creates these customer experiences, and you kind of can scale that. It's not really about the food as much as the whole he's a restaurateur instead of a chef. So it is a bit different.
That's it, mate. And this is a similar thing to, a McDonald's even. They've just got the system down, and then they build this brand around that kind of system that they've got.
Yeah. It's kind of like,
I had an example here, even
the equivalent of
sorry. I think we've got some lag, mate.
I think we're getting a little bit of lag here, listeners. Sorry. What I was going to say is that it's a little bit like the Jeremy Tower opening 12 stars is a bit like Miles Davis finding a whole bunch of people to play his songs and going around saying, come to Miles Davis concert tonight and hear, someone else play his songs. It doesn't work.
That is a really good analogy, I think, mate. It's a very good comparison. And it's so like, then what is the record of the restaurant? Well, it's not actually anything to do with a restaurant. It's probably cookbooks, which is a common method of scaling. It's, doing partnerships with other things. Like the example I wanted to pull out was is Jamie Oliver, which we see, who we see releasing books every year, I think, or probably a couple of books a year. I don't know. But even our own Ben Shiri back in Melbourne, and he's also in COVID has used it as an opportunity to innovate, but also kind of scale in some ways. So he's launched partnerships with Hamish Blake, which is in kind of the marketing sphere around cooking.
Yeah, they're great.
It's excellent. And also then this delivery business that he's got going now, and able to, take what is created in the restaurant and actually deliver it to more customers. But you're actually making less per item than what you would when someone comes in, because you're not charging the same amount, but it's still quite expensive. But I think there's probably more scalability there. There's more kind of that production line, and it's, right down the other end of the scale. You do eventually move to something like one of the, just any other kind of delivery service, big franchise delivery service. But the further you move towards that end of the spectrum, the more that you're losing that imbued art.
So something like TV shows, books, things like that, they seem to hold the essence because it still feels like a personal medium, do you think? It's still being delivered by the person to you at scale, one-on-one.
Yeah. You're hearing the voice, yes.
That's an interesting insight. The thing, just to go back to Coltrane for a sec, something that really sticks with me is just how long he kept himself in the shadows and worked at it until he was very patient, and that's something else that comes through in terms of essence for a lot of these people, is that the time for them to all shine was different, but there was sort of, the time was thrust upon them in a way. There was a right time where it happened, where everything clicked into place, and that may be because they were pushing themselves to be good enough to be found like that, or it might be just kind of fate or luck. I don't know the answer to that question, but it seems to me that, if we're trying to pull together thoughts from all of these guys, it was that they all had different timing, like Tower very early and faded, Molman building up to later in his life after he had a bit of a existential crisis around what he was doing, I think. Although he did have success in the middle too. Miles was a bit like Molman, and then Coltrane kind of had a peak later.
Yes. I think maybe what you're hitting on, mate, is that innovation is never just one big kaboom. It doesn't just occur in a big bang. And you see this actually across history, but we only remember a few names. So I was just trying to remember then Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison is renowned for just how inventive he was and inventing the light bulb. But there'd been so many like similar things done in the lead up to. He didn't just it wasn't just no such thing as anything near a light bulb, and the idea of like incandescence and electricity and all this other stuff. But it was a very iterative thing. But it's almost like it's done with the right timing, with the right. I think marketing is always critical in all these situations, and a marketing platform, which is why you see the likes of Miles and his wild clothing that he moves into. So I think marketing always plays a big role, no matter how much we might deny that, and no matter how unintentional it is. So these big innovations don't just occur; they're kind of happening. I've heard this theory of it, or not even the theory, just many recountings of great inventions that we know that were being invented or very closely invented on the other side of the world at the same time. We had the nuclear arms race. We had the quantum mechanics with Einstein. It just so happened that someone who was either already known or had a brand or had already had great exposure, and was probably also the first one to get there in the end.
There's so many examples like Newton with calculus. There's like almost every invention you can think of, the light globe had this. It's incredible, in fact, and it's got to. It kind of says that it's about this kind of probability combination for fitting things together rather than a stroke of genius. Evolution. I think there was someone who was very close to what Darwin was talking about. I think Darwin just kind of connected it a bit better, but it wasn't a unique idea either. Really interesting.
And there's a famous like mathematical theorem. I'm going to get it wrong. It's like Pascal or something, right? I can't recall it. But basically this guy that was in the 1500s, this famous mathematician, he came up with this theory, and he thought that he had a proof of it. But he actually died before he was able to write down the proof. But he just posed the problem.
It was Fermat's last theorem.
Fermat, that's it.
I read a book about this. It was interesting.
Yeah. And it took us hundreds of years to actually prove that he was right.
Because he wrote like a little hint that he's like, I know the answer in one of his in his ledger, and never wrote down the proof, and it took, like you said, hundreds of years to be able to get there.
Yeah.
I wonder if he did. Did he know?
Yeah.
Did he know?
Well, that's the thing. Maybe he just took the rest of us for a ride. But I think there's probably many examples in history, mate, where someone has been tinkering with ideas, but it just so happens they just kept it to themselves, or they, were silenced even in some bygone eras.
Or didn't find the right application, like Edison's gramophone. he never thought it would play music. He's like, it won't be used to play music. So like
he didn't want it. He was opposed to music on it.
So
like, you can't do this to my special instrument.
So often we don't realise what the invention's for. So I'd love to do a whole episode on that.
Yeah.
The theory,
just that idea of
innovation.
And what is it that, why is it that we remember Davis in this example and we don't remember someone else that was maybe on the same frontier, maybe on the other side of the world? I don't know. And again, it might be bring this startup term. It's like product market founder fit little piece. Maybe that's at play, but there's many other things at play.
Yeah, and something else for a discussion on another episode is, if it doesn't get popular, does it mean it wasn't good or creative? Maybe we can talk about the Banksy doco, exit through the gift shop, and kind of tackle that piece in a separate episode. I'd love to do that.
Sounds good, mate. It's a power law as well, because we don't remember second place. It's only first place that gets remembered. It's never the losers. The losers.
First place and first loser. That's it. So let's close it out, mate.
Do you want to hit us up with a quote or?
Please. So this is one from John Coltrane. There is never any end. There are always new sounds to imagine, new feelings to get at, and always there is the need to keep purifying these things and sounds so that we can really see what we've discovered in its pure state, so that we can see more and more clearly what we are. In that way, we can give to those who listen the essence, the best of what we are. But to do that at each stage, we have to keep on cleaning the mirror.
Deep.
Well,
mate, better get buffing that mirror. And we'll see you on the next episode, eh?
See you later. Bye.
See ya. And don't forget that you can check out full video from our episodes if you have been listening on our YouTube channel.
Bang.
Bang.
You remembered.
I remembered for once.
I forgot.
We'll see you next time.